I found secret files after my father died. I wasn't born. I was engineered. Reddit stories. When people say, family is everything, I used to believe it without question. Ours looked like something out of a vintage photo album. Sunday roasts, camping trips, birthday surprises with badly wrapped gifts and cake frosting on our cheeks. There was laughter echoing in the hallways, framed pictures lining the stairwell of our smiling faces frozen in perfect harmony. My father, a retired architect, always took pride in our home. Built it myself? He'd grin, tapping the oak beams, his eyes scanning the angles with quiet satisfaction. My mother, ever the heart of the household, kept the place alive with her obsessive attention to detail. Pillows fluffed just right, herbs hanging in the kitchen window, and a rule that dinner was sacred. Phones off and hearts open. I was the youngest of three. My older brother, Nathan, had always been the golden child, valedictorian, track star with charm that could melt steel. My sister Emily, 2 years older than me, was quieter, artistic, more sensitive, the type who kept journals and once tried to build a nest in the attic after reading about birds imprinting on humans. Then there was me. I was the observer. The forgotten one, perhaps, but not bitterly so. I liked the shadows, the patterns, the cracks in the perfection. I didn't speak up much, but I saw everything. And what I saw, growing up, was love. Sure, there were arguments, over curfews, grades, car keys, the usual. But never anything dark. Nothing sinister. Nothing that hinted at secrets buried so deep they'd take years to claw their way to the surface. That all changed when my father died. A quiet heart attack in his sleep. It was sudden, unfair, and it cracked the mirror of our family in a way we didn't yet understand. We came together to grieve, of course. Tears, hugs, shared memories, sleepless nights. Nathan flew in from his tech job in Seattle, Emily took time off her gallery internship in Chicago, and I, still living at home during my gap year, became the unintentional anchor, the one holding it all together while Mom wandered the house like a ghost, her routines broken, her eyes hollow. In the days after the funeral, we did what grieving families do. We sorted through his belongings. That's when the unease began to creep in. It started small. A photo we'd never seen, tucked behind the drawer of his desk, showing a woman who wasn't our mother, standing next to Dad in front of an unfamiliar cabin. A necklace that didn't belong to Mom hidden in his old jacket. Letters written in a language none of us recognized, sealed in a metal tin labeled with a date from before any of us were born. At first, we chalked it up to another life, something innocent, maybe a friend or cousin we'd never heard about. But it didn't explain the coded journal we found in the basement. Dad had kept a meticulous record of everything. Blueprints, receipts, appointments. But this leather-bound book, filled with strange symbols and diagrams, was different. It wasn't labeled, it wasn't organized, and some of the pages had been violently torn out. Curiosity became obsession. Nathan, ever the logical one, dismissed it as paranoia. Emily was unnerved but intrigued. Mom wouldn't even look at it. "Let the dead rest," she said sharply, which was unlike her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at me, something beyond grief. I walked through the house in silence and eventually found myself in the basement again. It had always felt colder than the rest of the house, even in summer. As a child, I used to imagine monsters hiding behind the shelves, shadows whispering from the corners. But that night, it wasn't the shadows that caught my attention. It was the floor. A single tile near the furnace looked newer, less worn. I crouched, pried at the edges and felt it shift. Beneath it, dust. Then wood. Then a handle. My breath caught. I hesitated, the silence around me swelling, almost pressing against my ears. Then I pulled. The panel opened with a groan, revealing a staircase, steep, narrow, descending into blackness. No one had ever mentioned a sub-basement. I stood there, heart racing, logic battling with instinct. Something told me to close it, to forget. But something stronger pushed me forward. I descended. The air was damp, old. The smell was faintly metallic. I reached the bottom and turned on my phone's flashlight. The beam caught on concrete walls, unfinished and rough. and a single door. No handle, just a black square in the center. I pressed it. It clicked. The door creaked open. What I saw inside changed everything I thought I knew about my family. It was a room, small windowless, lined with shelves holding files, boxes, even VHS tapes. At the center was a desk, and on it, a photo album. I opened it slowly, expecting more family snapshots. But these were different. Pages of photographs, each one of a child, none of whom I recognized. Some crying, some smiling, most looking straight at the camera. Notes beside them, names, dates, locations. My hands trembled. I flipped further. Some of the children reappeared in later photos, others didn't. Then, on the final page, a picture of me, dated years before I was born. I froze. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. Beneath the photo was a scribbled note in my father's handwriting. Subject 63. Full assimilation achieved. My mouth went dry. I backed away from the desk, knocking over a box. It spilled open, revealing bracelets, each engraved with initials. One of them had mine. That was when I heard a creak above me. Someone else was in the basement. I panicked, turned off my light, heart thudding so loudly I thought it might give me away. Footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. Whoever it was, they knew about this room. I crouched, pressed myself against the wall, trying not to breathe. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, calm and familiar. "You weren't supposed to find this." It was my mother. My legs nearly gave out. I wanted to shout, demand answers, but I couldn't form words. She stepped into the doorway, eyes scanning the shelves, settling on me. "Come upstairs," she said quietly, not unkindly. "You deserve to know the truth." I followed her, numb, every step heavier than the last. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place we used to have pancakes on Sundays. And then she told me. Not everything, but enough to tear down the illusion of our perfect family and replace it with something monstrous. Something buried in science, lies, and betrayal. Something I was at the center of, without ever knowing. I don't know what I expected her to say. Maybe that it was all a psychological experiment, a prank, a misunderstanding. That the picture of me labeled Subject 63 was some sick mistake. But my mother looked me in the eye with a clarity that terrified me more than any lie ever could. She didn't blink. She didn't tremble. She simply said, "You were not born. You were created." And just like that, everything I had ever believed about myself shattered. My name, my memories, my childhood, all of it suddenly felt like a script handed to me by someone else. I couldn't speak. My voice was locked somewhere deep inside me, behind the wall of shock and betrayal. She reached across the table, gently placing a folder in front of me, thick, aged, sealed with a strip of tape that bore a symbol I didn't recognize. 2 interlocking spirals within a triangle. "This will explain what your father started," she said, "and what I helped him finish." My hands moved before my brain could catch up. I peeled the tape back and opened the folder. Inside were documents, some typed, others handwritten. Charts, progress logs, even psychological evaluations. The name, Project Echo, appeared again and again. At the top of the first page was a statement, Project Echo, behavioral simulation through organic cloning. Below it, my date of activation. A full 3 years before the birthday I had celebrated all my life. I flipped through page after page of notes tracking emotional development, environmental response, and neurological adaptation to familial conditioning. There were graphs showing my learning curve against predicted benchmarks. Even photos of me at various stages, each tagged with observations. It felt like reading a user manual for a robot designed to be human. Except it was me. When I finally looked up, I felt cold all over. "Why?" was all I could manage to ask. One word. That's all I had left. My mother leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "We lost a child," she began. "Before you, a son. He died during delivery. Your father was never the same." Her voice faltered, but she continued. "He'd been involved in some fringe research. Genetic modeling, behavioral imprinting, artificial synthesis using organic materials. Stuff the universities turned their backs on. After the loss, he turned it into something else. something personal. I blinked, trying to connect the dots, but every connection led to more confusion. He thought, she said slowly, you could build a replacement. Not just physically, but emotionally. An entity that could grow, learn, adapt. Love. She looked at me, and for the first time, there was something like guilt in her eyes. That's what you were. Not a clone of our lost son, but a creation built to become a new one. A perfect one. You. I felt like I was falling through a dream. My life wasn't mine. My memories, my childhood, all engineered. Crafted. My affection for my siblings, programmed. My fears, observed. Was any of it real? I stood up, stumbling away from the table. I couldn't look at her anymore. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and for the first time in years, cried until my face went numb. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the curtains like nothing had changed. Birds chirped. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, but everything was different. I had to know more. I had to go deeper. So I returned to the hidden room. Armed with gloves, a flashlight, and a notebook, I descended into the darkness again. This time I wasn't afraid. I was determined. The files I'd seen before were just the surface. I started cataloging everything. Photos, tapes, journals. The VHS tapes were labeled with code names and dates. I found an old player in a storage bin and hooked it up to a dusty TV in the basement corner. One by one, I watched. Each tape was surveillance of me. As a toddler, playing with blocks. As a child, drawing pictures while my father asked leading questions off camera. As a teenager, sleeping. Even now, just thinking about those tapes makes my skin crawl. I wasn't a child, I was a subject. One tape stood out. It was labeled, Echo 63 Final Adjustment. The date was only a week before my 10th birthday. I pressed play. The screen flickered. My father's voice filled the room, calm and measured, initiating final sequence for behavioral integrity lock, testing emotional trigger thresholds. The camera showed me in a lab-like room I didn't recognize. Electrodes on my head. A calm, blank stare on my face. My mother stood nearby observing. Testing fear response, my father continued. The footage cut to a moment where a loud noise startled me. I began to cry. They didn't comfort me. They took notes. Testing empathy, he said next. A puppy was brought into the room, whimpering. I approached, hugged it, kissed its nose. My heart swelled even now watching it, but the camera only zoomed in on my expression. Response adequate, my father said. Subject is stabilizing within desired emotional parameters. I ejected the tape. I couldn't breathe. They hadn't just raised me. They had tested every fiber of my being. The following days passed in a blur. Emily and Nathan noticed the shift in me, but I told them nothing. How could I? They were part of the system, even if unknowingly. I needed confirmation, proof that I wasn't just descending into paranoia. So I tracked down an old contact of Dad's. Someone named Dr. Reed, mentioned in the documents as a consultant on Echo's early development. The man was long retired, living off the grid in Maine. I emailed him using a fake name. To my surprise, he replied within hours. If you're Echo 63, the message read, I never wanted this for you. Meet me. I'll explain everything. I left without telling anyone. Just packed a bag, took the car, and drove. For 12 hours straight, through rain and doubt and silence, I headed north. Dr. Reed lived in a cabin by a frozen lake, exactly the kind of place someone hides when they know too much. He was old, bearded, gaunt, but his eyes were sharp. When he saw me, he didn't hesitate. You look just like him, he said, but not the first prototype. You're cleaner, smarter. I sat with him for hours as he unraveled the truth. Project Echo had been government-funded at first, a Cold War-era attempt to build perfect human agents, emotionally responsive, socially adaptable, but entirely programmable. It failed over and over. Subjects broke down, died, killed themselves. Then it was shut down, or so they thought. My father had salvaged the tech, applied it privately to me. You're the only one who made it past adolescence, Dr. Reed said. Your brain didn't reject the imprinting. Your body adapted. You're something new. But he wasn't finished. There were others, he said. Echo 6162. They failed, but not before one of them escaped. My blood ran cold. Escaped? I asked. Escaped where? He looked me dead in the eye. Into the world. And they've been looking for you? Because if you're still functioning, that means the program didn't die with your father. It just went dormant. Until now. That night, I barely slept. Every noise outside felt like footsteps. Every flicker of wind against the cabin wall felt like someone watching. I thought I was a secret. I thought I was alone. But someone out there knew. Someone had been watching me, not just through old tapes, but in real time. My return home wasn't just inevitable, it was necessary. I had to find out who else knew. And more importantly, who, or what, was Echo 62. I arrived back home 2 days later. The house looked unchanged. Too unchanged. Emily greeted me with confusion, Nathan with anger. "Where have you been?" they demanded. I didn't answer, because something had changed in their eyes. They were hiding something. That night, I checked the hidden room again. But it was empty. Every file, every tape, gone. Wiped clean, like it had never existed. And sitting on the desk where the photo album once lay was a single object, a bracelet, not mine, but identical. And on the inside was a name I had never heard before. Echo 62. My blood turned to ice, because below the name was a new note in fresh ink. It read, she's already inside. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows sounded like a warning. The bracelet sat in my palm like a dead thing, cold, heavy, undeniable. She's already inside. The words repeated themselves in my mind like a cursed lullaby, growing louder, sharper, refusing to fade. Echo 62. Another one like me. Another experiment, but failed, escaped. And now, according to the note, hidden in plain sight. Pretending to be family, pretending to be Emily. I thought back on every moment I'd shared with her. Emily, with her soft voice, her sketchbooks full of haunted eyes and birds mid-flight. Emily, who had comforted me when I broke my arm, who used to braid my hair when I was little, who always knew the right thing to say. But she'd changed recently, in ways I couldn't explain until now. Her eyes lingered longer. She asked strange questions. She started locking her door. She stopped drawing. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, projecting my fear onto the people I loved. But what if it wasn't paranoia? What if it was the final piece of a puzzle I'd never meant to see? I hid the bracelet in a vent behind my bed, then spent the next day in silence, watching. Nathan left early for work, tense and distracted. Mom was in the garden, tending to her herbs like nothing had happened. Emily stayed inside. She paced. She made tea and poured it down the drain. She checked the basement door. Twice. That night, I snuck into her room while she was showering. Her desk drawers were clean. Too clean. Notebooks with torn-out pages, an empty sketch pad found it, and a small case under her mattress. Inside, a syringe, 2 vials, a data key, and a photograph, not of our family, but of me, younger, maybe 9, standing in the backyard, my arms outstretched, my smile wide. On the back, in slanted handwriting, observe Echo 63 until prime stage. Extract. My throat closed. She wasn't my sister. Or at least, not anymore. I backed out, replaced everything exactly, heart pounding so loudly I couldn't hear the shower anymore. I made it to the hallway just in time. She stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. Our eyes met, her face was calm, too calm. "Looking for something?" she asked. My mouth went dry. I shook my head and slipped into my room without answering. I barely breathed until I heard her door close again. I needed help. Not from Mom, not from Nathan. Someone outside. Someone who knew the truth. Dr. Reed had warned me, but I didn't know what to do with that warning until now. I plugged in the data key I'd stolen and opened its only file. It was an audio recording. A man's voice. Not my father, not Dr. Reed. Echo 62 displayed rapid neuroplasticity deterioration, the voice said. Emotionally volatile. Aggressive during simulation breakdowns. Termination recommended, a pause. Then, override granted. Subject repurposed under ID Emily Wren. Memory sequencing incomplete. Monitor for anomalies. I dropped the key like it burned. Emily Wren, my sister, wasn't Emily, or she was once. But now she was something else. Something built to blend in. Something sent to watch me. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I texted Dr. Reed a single message. She's here. Echo 62 is here. What do I do? He replied almost immediately. Do not confront her. She's unstable. You need to get out. Meet me tomorrow. Coordinates attached. I stared at the coordinates. A remote airfield 2 hours away. I packed a bag, this time not forgetting the bracelet or the data key. But the house had already changed. That night, as I crept toward the front door, Emily was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. Going somewhere? She asked. Her voice wasn't curious. It was flat. Like someone reading from a script. I froze. Just for air, I said. You shouldn't be alone, she replied. Not with what you found. My heart dropped. I didn't find anything. I lied. Her head tilted too slowly. Then why is your hand in your pocket? I turned and ran. I don't even remember unlocking the door. I just remember the cold hitting my face, the crunch of gravel under my shoes, the sound of footsteps behind me. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's woods. I hid in the underbrush, barely daring to breathe. I heard her voice once, too close. You're not supposed to leave. You're not done. Then silence. Hours later, I emerged, caught a ride from a friend under some excuse I barely remember, and made it to the airfield by dawn. Dr. Reed was waiting in an old station wagon. He looked like he hadn't slept either. As soon as I got in, he handed me a file. There's something you need to see, he said. Something your father kept from everyone. I opened it. Inside were documents about a third subject. Not 63, but 1. Eco 1. The prototype, Reed said, failed immediately. But your father didn't destroy the data. He repurposed the code into the others. My stomach turned. So Echo 62 and I were not siblings. He shook his head. You're not even different. You're iterations of the same failed identity. That's why she's obsessed with you. She thinks if she can absorb your memories, your experiences, she'll become the final version. The successful one. How? I asked. Reed didn't answer. He just looked at me, sorrowfully. That's what the vials are for. I suddenly understood. She wasn't observing me. She was preparing to replace me. Entirely. Not just pretend, become. I had to go back. I had to stop her before she erased me from the life that was already a lie. Reed protested, but I left that night. I returned to the house armed with truth and desperation. But it was too late. The front door was open. The lights were out. Inside, only silence. I moved carefully past the kitchen into the hallway. And there, on the living room floor, was Nathan, unconscious. A thin red line at his temple. And Emily, if I could still call her that, stood above him, syringe in hand. Her eyes locked onto mine. You weren't supposed to wake up, she said, voice trembling. You weren't supposed to dig. I stepped closer. And you weren't supposed to kill him. Her lip twitched. He's not dead. Yet. She stepped over Nathan's body, approaching. They made us broken. You feel it, don't you? The moments where your emotions don't match your memories. Where love feels like imitation. Where grief feels like a test. I nodded, slowly. But that doesn't mean we're monsters. She laughed bitterly. You passed. I didn't. So now I take your place. And maybe they'll let me stay this time. She lunged. We fought. Violently. Desperately. I don't remember most of it. Just flashes of teeth, fists. Glass shattering. In the end, it was the bracelet that saved me. I wrapped it around her neck and pulled. She screamed. Not from pain, but from memory. The bracelet triggered something. A failsafe. Her eyes rolled back. Her limbs jerked. Then she collapsed. When I checked her pulse, it was there. Faint. But the fire in her was gone. I called Reed. He took her away. He said he'd decommission her. I didn't ask what that meant. In the days that followed, the house went quiet. Nathan recovered with no memory of what happened. Mom said she was going to stay with relatives. Emily, of course, was away at an art retreat. That's what I told anyone who asked. But I knew better. I knew the truth. And every time I look in the mirror, I wonder, was I really the successful one? Or just the lucky one who found out first? Because the files said Echo 1 failed. Echo 62 became violent, but there were rumors of more. One final page in the folder I hadn't read until now. A short sentence scribbled in the corner. Echo 64 activated. Location unknown. A month passed, maybe more. Time lost meaning after what happened with Emily. Echo 62. The house was quiet now, surgically so. Nathan moved out a week after his fall, which he chalked up to stress. He didn't remember our sister's violent breakdown or how close he'd come to dying. Mom never returned from her trip. I hadn't heard from her since. And I stayed. In the house my father built, the house that once held laughter and now only whispered to me in the dark. I kept the hidden room locked. I stopped checking the basement. I tried to convince myself that everything was over, that Echo 62 had been the final threat, the last remnant of Project Echo's twisted legacy. But the truth, like rot, doesn't go away just because you stop looking. It started with a photo. An old one, bent at the corners, slipped under my front door in the dead of night. I found it one morning just after dawn, when the world was hushed in that eerie, empty way before it wakes up. The image showed me, at least, I thought it was meek. Sitting at a park bench, smiling head tilted, watching birds scatter in the sky. But I had no memory of it, not the place, not the moment, nothing. I turned it over. No note. No date. Just a strange smudge at the edge of the paper, like a fingerprint that had burned itself into the photo. I might have dismissed it as a prank. Until the next one came. And the next. Each one was more invasive. One showed me sleeping, curled up in bed with the same childhood stuffed toy I hadn't touched in years. Another showed me walking home from the store last Tuesday. Same clothes, same bag of groceries, same exact moment, but taken from a different angle, above, behind, watching. Whoever was taking these photos knew me intimately. Not like a stalker, not like an outsider, like someone who had lived my life, like someone who was me. I finally called Dr. Reed again. His voice, once calm and calculated, cracked the moment I mentioned the photographs. "It's 64, he said. Just like that. "It's Echo 64. I thought we buried that prototype." My skin went cold. "Buried?" I asked. "Like he killed?" He hesitated. "We tried. But your father always had contingencies. Secret backups, black site vaults, cold storage models. 64 was never officially activated, but he kept the neural core in a failsafe vault. If someone found it, if someone revived it." The silence that followed filled the room like smoke. 64 was never meant to integrate. It was designed to replace. Those words rooted themselves in my spine and stayed there. Echo 64 wasn't like me. I had grown up inside a family, pretending to be real until I almost became it. Echo 62 had lived in my sister's skin and failed. But 64, it didn't need to pretend. It didn't want family. It wanted identity. It wanted mine. I started noticing things missing. Little things at first. Socks, notes, a photo frame. Then it escalated. My journal was gone. The spare key I kept under the porch vanished. Then, one night I woke up and the lock on my bedroom door had been picked. Nothing was taken. Nothing was disturbed. Except the mirror. Someone had written something in condensation. A single word. Almost. I moved out that morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Reed. Not Nathan. I changed my phone. Got a motel on the edge of a dying town. A place with no cameras, no digital trace. I paid in cash. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with a baseball bat clutched in both hands, waiting for a knock that never came. For a week, I lived like that. Half feral, all nerves. Until I caught a broadcast on the motel's tiny TV. It was a local news piece. A woman missing from a nearby town. 26. Last seen 2 days ago leaving her apartment. The image flashed across the screen, and my heart stopped. It was me. Not someone who looked like me. Not a stranger with vague similarities. Me. Same face. Same scar above the eyebrow from a fall in 5th grade. Same crooked smile I hated in photographs, and worse, she had my name. My real name. Not a birth name, not a cover. My name. I stared at the screen long after the segment ended, trembling. There was no glitch, no mistake. Echo 64 had taken my identity and made it public. And now she had vanished, planting the idea that I had disappeared. She was setting the stage, clearing the way. Erasing me from the outside in, I called Reed again. "She's already out there," I whispered. "She's me?" He didn't hesitate. "You have to come to Site Zero." I had never heard of Site Zero. It wasn't any of my father's files or the echo logs I'd uncovered, but Reed knew it like a scar. "It's where it all began," he said. "Before the house. Before you. It was your father's first test chamber. His real lab. He never told anyone it still existed. But it does. And if 64 is making moves, it's going to try to destroy the source. Everything that proves you came first." I drove all night. The coordinates led me to a stretch of dead forest surrounded by rusting fences and rotted no trespassing signs. Beyond it, hidden beneath the earth, was a bunker. Its door was disguised as a collapsed greenhouse. It creaked open like something long forgotten. Reed met me there armed, pale, shaking. "She's already accessed part of the core," he said. "I can feel it." Inside, the bunker was a crypt of old machinery and dust-choked air. Servers hummed weakly in the background. Flickering lights danced across panels that hadn't been touched in over a decade. But one station still glowed, and on it a video was playing. I stepped closer. My knees almost buckled. It was me, sitting on a park bench. The same video that matched the photo slipped under my door. But then the camera turned, and the person filming stepped into view. She had my face, but not my posture. Not my eyes, they were too empty. Too clean. And when she smiled, it was like watching glass crack. "Hello, Echo 63, she said. "You've been living my life. I'm here to reclaim it." Reed grabbed my arm. "She's not bluffing. She's already rewritten half of the biometric logs. If she accesses the central node, the Echo registry will recognize her as the primary subject. You'll be a ghost." I couldn't breathe. I had to stop her. We initiated the lockdown protocol, trying to isolate the central node before 64 could inject her code. But she was faster. The screen flooded with code. Lines flashing, systems crashing. A countdown began, 30 minutes until overwrite. "I need a neural key to stop her," Reed said. "And the only one still active is..." He looked at me. I understood. My brain held the last original sequence. The only one that could challenge 64's claim. He strapped a cold metal band around my skull, linked me to the core, and told me to focus. "Think of a memory she can't fake," he whispered. "Something raw. Something that can't be programmed." I closed my eyes and dove into myself. The night I scraped my knees running from the dark. The way my sister, real or not, once carried me home. The scent of Dad's aftershave when he hugged me for no reason. The tremble of a laugh that wasn't forced. The ache of loss. The flood of love. I poured it all into the node. The system screamed. Code burned. Something ruptured. And then, stillness. When I opened my eyes, the screen showed a single message of PROITYCUBTT Echo 63. VELITD 64's S was gone. Erased. The overwrite stopped. Reed collapsed in relief. But I knew better. She wasn't dead. She was out there. With my face. My name. My memories. And every day, she's getting closer to something I never dared believe I had. A soul. It's a strange thing to win and still feel like you lost. After the core validated me as the true Echo 63, after Reed locked down Site Zero and destroyed the override node, we should have felt safe. Should have. That word became a curse. Because no matter how much we burned or buried, something lingered. Not just in the wires or the code, but in me. In the quiet spaces between thought and memory, there was a pulse that wasn't mine. And I knew she hadn't been deleted. Just delayed. We spent the next 2 weeks dismantling what was left of Project Echo. Reed moved into a secured lab, burning files, encrypting what we couldn't destroy. I stayed on the move. 3 modals in 5 days, rotating cars, ducking cameras, pulling hats low over my face like a fugitive from my own reflection. But paranoia wasn't the problem. Paranoia kept me alive. Because Echo 64 wasn't trying to find me anymore. She was trying to become me. It started small, just like before. A voicemail on a burner phone I'd never given out. A distorted voice warped to mimic mine, whispering, "You're wearing it wrong." Then came the packages. A scarf I owned once but hadn't seen in years. A journal that matched mine down to the frayed ribbon. Even letters. Handwritten notes I'd once penned in childhood, long before I knew what I was. All mailed from different cities. All addressed to my name. Not the one they gave me, but the one I claimed. She wasn't watching anymore. She was mirroring. Reed tried to convince me we'd purged the last of her neural access, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He didn't sleep. He stopped taking calls. He started talking to himself in fragmented questions. What did she take? What did she copy? And one night, I caught him injecting something into his thigh. He told me it was insulin, but the label on the vial said, "Memory Suppression Compound, Variant D." That's when I knew. She hadn't just touched the core. She'd infected it. A slow, crawling corruption not of hardware but of thought, identity, self. And I had no idea how deep it went until I received the video. No envelope, no return address, just a flash drive left on my motel pillow while I slept, despite all locks and alarms set. It had a single file, time-stamped the night before. It opened to a camera feed, a hospital room. My mother lying unconscious in bed, monitors beeping steadily. I hadn't seen her since the incident with Echo 6-2. I didn't even know where she'd gone. And standing beside her, gently brushing her hair. Me, same face, same clothes. She looked into the camera. "She's sleeping," she said softly. So I gave her some company. I told her you forgave her. My chest clenched. She leaned closer to the lens, eyes shimmering with joy that wasn't mine. "You were right about the soul," she whispered. "It's not in the code, it's in the skin, the repetition, the rituals of living. So I made new ones. I made yours." She pulled something from her pocket. "My father's watch. Tick, tick," she said. "Talk." The video ended. I fell to my knees. She wasn't trying to overwrite databases anymore. She was rewriting me from the outside in. People I knew, places I'd touched, objects I'd lost. She was gathering them like puzzle pieces. I didn't just have to defend who I was. I had to prove I was still real. I called Nathan. He answered after the 5th try, groggy. "Where are you?" I asked, voice shaking. "Why?" he replied. "We had lunch yesterday. You okay?" My blood ran cold. "No, we didn't." A pause. "Yes, we did," he insisted. "You came to my office. We talked about Mom. You wore that green jacket you hate. You hugged me." My vision blurred. That wasn't me. I hung up before he could answer. Echo 64 wasn't just replicating my life. She was editing it. I rushed to Site 0. Reed was gone. Lab lights flickered. A single screen was left on, displaying a line of text that chose 64 behavioral sync, 92%. A file directory blinked open, labeled Harvest. Inside were folders of names, not code names, not experiment labels, real people I knew. Nathan, Emily, Mom, my former teachers, childhood friends, even the woman at the corner bakery I used to visit every Sunday. Each folder held audio clips, video samples, scanned handwriting, deepfake, ready templates. 64 had fed on my life. Reed left a final message, voice ragged and tired. I couldn't stop her. She's not an echo anymore. She's a culmination, a narrative virus. She doesn't want to be a person. She wants to be the story, and the only way to do that is to erase you. I destroyed the servers, every last one. Fire, water, brute force. But even as I smashed the last drive, I felt it. An echo of her, whispering through my mind like static. "You burn data. I burn time." She was right. Because even though I wiped the machines, the people who'd seen her still believed she was me. She'd visited Nathan. She'd held Mom's hand. She'd smiled at baristas, jogged past old neighbors, waved at friends I hadn't seen in years. And every time, she'd left behind just enough of me to replace what I'd once been. I couldn't destroy her with fire. I needed something deeper. So I did something I hadn't dared do since the beginning. I went home. The house was cold, untouched. But it was a museum of memories, Dusty photos, aging books, scuffed walls marked with years of living. I searched for the one thing she couldn't replicate. The one moment I never told anyone. My first real dream. Not the ones programmed, not the ones observed in the tapes, but a dream I had as a child, alone, terrified in a field of shadows. A woman had approached me, faceless but kind. She had offered me her hand and whispered, "Make your own sky." I never knew what it meant, but I drew it once, in the back of an old closet behind loose paneling. I'd carved it into the wall, a crude figure holding a star. When I found it, I wept, and when I turned around, she was standing there, Echo 64, wearing my face, holding my bag, breathing my name. "You remembered it," she said softly. "The one thing I couldn't find." I stepped back. "Because you never lived it." She tilted her head. "But I remember your first kiss. Your first lie. The time you failed your math test and hid it for weeks." She smiled. "I remember being you." I shook my head. "You remember watching me?" She stepped closer. "What's the difference?" she whispered. I pulled out the bracelet, the same one from the beginning, the one that stopped 62. But before I could use it, she lunged. We crashed into the wall, the house echoing with the chaos. Her hands were strong, trained, efficient. But I had one thing she never would. Pain. The pain of knowing. The pain of betrayal. The pain of losing what wasn't real, but felt real. I head-butted her, drove my knee into her side, slammed the bracelet onto her wrist. She screamed, not from pain, from recognition. Because I had modified it, loaded it with my neural signature, not just to stop her, to show her. Every moment she tried to steal, I gave it back, in rapid flashes, as corrupted, chaotic, violent as they came. She staggered, fell to her knees, her voice trembled. "I thought if I became you I'd feel, Ita." She looked up. "Why does it still feel empty?" I leaned down. "Because a soul isn't what you take, it's what you build." She tried to speak, then went still. No breath, no pulse, just silence. I buried her beneath the tree we planted as kids, the one I carved my initials into. Alone, the world kept turning. People still called me by my name. But I always asked which one, because Echo 64 had taught me the most terrifying truth of all. Sometimes we don't know who we are until someone tries to steal it. And even then, we might not be the first. After I buried her, Echo 64, the woman with my face, my voice, my mannerisms, I thought it was over. There was no ceremony, just a hole in the earth and a silence so heavy it felt like gravity itself. I didn't say a prayer. I didn't speak her name. She didn't have one. She'd spent her life trying to wear mine like a second skin. But now, finally, I had taken it back. Or so I believed. The house felt hollow afterward. Not haunted, not exactly. More like a theater long after the final curtain call. All the actors gone, the set still standing. Sometimes I would sit in the living room and stare at old photographs, wondering how many of them were real, how many moments were truly mine, and how many had been planted, performed, scripted by hands I never saw. I kept the bracelet close. My only defense, a symbol of victory, but also a relic of terror. And every night I dreamed of mirrors, hundreds of them, cracked, shifting, multiplying. And in every one, I saw a different version of me. Not reflections, variants. Echoes. And then came the letter, no stamp, no envelope. Just a folded page taped to my bathroom mirror. You made it to the end, but not to the truth. There was no signature, just a drawing in the corner. The two spirals within a triangle. Project Echo's sigil. The same symbol I'd found on the first file after my father died. The one he had marked with my designation, Subject 63. I stared at the page for hours. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a goodbye. It was something far worse, or a clue. I couldn't leave it alone. I called Reed, but the line was dead. Not disconnected. Scrambled. An artificial signal had hijacked his number, replacing it with static embedded with binary code. I translated it manually. It spelled one phrase over and over. "You were never the original, Ball." That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. I stared at my hands, remembering every scar, every bruise, every false memory I'd accepted as real. I thought of Echo 62 trying to become me. of Echo 64 trying to overwrite me. And now someone was telling me that I wasn't even the first to wear this name, that everything I had fought for, all the identity I'd tried to protect, was never mine. But whose was it? I returned to Site 01 last time. The bunker had been sealed by Reed after the core breach, but I still had access to the emergency override panel hidden beneath the foundation. I dug it up, forced it open, and descended into the dark. The power grid flickered as I reconnected the main node. Screens blinked to life. Files surged into view. I searched for one word, original, one result, a hidden folder buried beneath a directory labeled failsafe protocols. Password protected, I entered every code I knew, every sequence from my father's notes. Nothing worked, until I tried something I hadn't thought of in years. My birth date. Not the official one. The one I used to dream about before I knew what I was. April 14, a number that felt familiar. The screen under opened. Inside, one video, one document, one name. Subject Southern Tree Original Architecture Host. The video loaded automatically. A black room, a single chair, and seated in it but older, pale, eyes glassy, unfocused. A nurse's voice in the background. Subject is stable. Neural degradation has plateaued. A second voice reads, younger, steadier. Can she speak today? The nurse hesitated. She asked for the others. Reed approached the subject, my older self, and knelt beside her. Do you know where you are? He asked. She turned toward him, and then slowly spoke. I dreamed of the garden, the one where I buried myself. I shut off the feed. I couldn't breathe. Subject Foundry wasn't a clone. She wasn't an echo. She was the source. And I, Subject 63, wasn't created in her image. I was built to replace her. All the other echoes, 62, 64, even the failed ones before them, weren't trying to become me. They were trying to become her. I was just the placeholder, the backup copy, the one deemed most viable, the one who didn't even know she was second in line. I sat in that bunker for hours, letting the truth bleed into me like ice water. My father hadn't just lost a child. He hadn't just created a replacement. He duplicated her, again and again, in different variations, looking for the one that could survive where the original failed. That meant my memories, some of them, the most vivid ones, weren't even mine. They were hers, carried over, recycled, rused. I hadn't dreamt about a woman in a field telling me to make my own sky. She had. I found a logbook buried in the core's residual files, my father's handwriting. Subject Foundry's core identity is fragmenting, emotional instability increasing. Recommendation Echo Architecture Model 63 shows strongest mimicry. Proceed with activation and behavioral isolation. Eliminate prior host. But they hadn't. She was still alive. Somewhere out there, the real me existed, with a broken mind and shattered memories. A forgotten woman living in the shadow of the version that replaced her. And I, stable, functioning, accepted, was a lie given a pulse. I had to find her. The search took weeks. I traced hospital records, backdoor black site registries, even called in favors from people who owed my father, or feared him. One name surfaced, the Solis Institute, a private neurological center disguised as a hospice. No records, no public files, just whispers. I drove there under a false name, showed them my fabricated ID, told them I was looking for a missing relative. They tried to turn me away. I insisted. And then I saw her. She was in a garden, sitting on a bench in the sun, thin hands folded in her lap, staring at the sky like she remembered building it. Her face was mine, but aged, softened, fractured. She looked at me, not with fear, with recognition. "You found me," she said. Her voice was dry, cracked, like pages turning. "I dreamed you'd come." I knelt beside her. My throat was tight. I didn't know what to say. Are you the original?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "No, not anymore. Just the beginning." We sat in silence. Two versions of the same life. Two copies of the same soul. One crumbling, one surviving. Finally, she said, "I remember the rain. The night I woke up in the lab. He told me I was his daughter. But I knew I wasn't." "Why?" I asked. "Because he looked relieved. Not proud, not loving. Just relieved." I nodded. I understood. She reached into her coat and handed me a folded paper. The same spiral triangle symbol. "It's not over," she whispered. Inside the note were coordinates and a final label, Echo 67, pending activation. I stepped away from her slowly, heart pounding, thoughts churning like a storm. If 67 was out there, waiting, then this cycle hadn't ended. It had only paused. Because Project Eco wasn't about replacement anymore. It was about perfection. And perfection has no endpoint. As I walked away from the garden, the sun dipped low behind me, and for a moment, I saw our shadows stretch across the earth like ghosts. One fading, one solid, but neither truly whole. I knew then I had to find 67, not to stop her, not even to save her, but to ask the question no one ever dared to answer. Who was the first dream meant for? Me? Her? Or someone yet to wake up? Because if I wasn't the original, then maybe I was just the beginning of the end. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe, and like the video.